I finally rolled credits on Gotham Knights, and I'm finally ready to start talking about the game in full on my channel, both with this non-spoiler review as well as more spoilery discussions that will be coming this next week. But I hope that these videos aren't too little too late, because even though Gotham Knights only released 2 weeks ago, the conversations surrounding the game seem to be vanishing as quickly as Robin jumping into short-range teleportation. I wanted to have it up much earlier, but when you're trying to juggle a full-time job and a life on top of a crippling video game addiction, and then by the time you record and edit something, it just takes a bit of time. But ultimately, I think with God of War and Hogwarts Legacy and other games on the horizon, people are starting to look towards some of those other games. Unfortunately, however, I don't think it's just that. I think that the lack of coverage on Gotham Knights only 2 weeks after its launch bodes a pretty bleak future for the Gotham Knights universe and standalone game itself, in that it just does not seem to be making much of an impression on the gaming community. After having played Gotham Knights in full, I can say that unfortunately, while I can not only understand the initial mixed reception to Gotham Knights, I understand why conversation isn't continuing about this game only 2 weeks after it came out. And the primary reason for that is that the one word I would use to describe my experience with Gotham Knights is shallow. Notice that I'm not saying unfun or glitchy or any negative connotation. I had fun for pretty much all of my time with Gotham Knights. I enjoyed pretty much every minute that I was playing the game. However, very little of Gotham Knights stood out, and very little about Gotham Knights makes me eager to return to the experience anytime soon. When I compare this to something like Arkham or Spider-Man or even Guardians of the Galaxy from Square Enix, it's a stark contrast, as with each of those games I couldn't wait to further explore the worlds and find new secrets to uncover and re-experience those stories. With Gotham Knights, however, there just isn't enough depth for me to justify getting excited about reliving this experience. With all that being said, I don't want to put out the wrong idea here. I don't think that Gotham Knights is the product of any lazy developer or even any lazy idea. I feel like Gotham Knights is the result of a game that was too bloated with too many ideas that were never cut down, and as a result, rather than having a few really awesome implemented features, it has a lot of half-baked implemented features. This game ambitiously pushes to be the next major evolution in the superhero video game genre, but unfortunately its very evolutions that it tries to make are what weigh it down from being that great experience, and instead it feels like it stumbles a few steps backward rather than moving forward. It's not that the ideas themselves are bad. I think the idea of playing as the Bat family and having a story where you get to choose which character you're playing as and getting the opportunity to play through the campaign and side activities with another player and getting to experience multiplayer or single player, I think those are all awesome. I also like all the ideas of giving the player prep time, of going back to the home base of the Bat family and figuring out what the premeditated crimes of the next night will be and planning out how you are going to patrol the city and take care of them in the correct order. I liked the idea of a more slow burn story that feels more like it's in the style of something like Spider-Man Homecoming, about these characters trying to live up to a legend rather than already being legends themselves, and in turn making the player feel like they are becoming what Batman's legacy could be after he has gone. I even think that a lot of the customization ideas stand out really strongly. I like all the cosmetic options, I like the abilities that you can choose for each character, and even the ability to choose which character you are playing as is a really interesting and compelling idea, but unfortunately a lot of those ideas, while not bad on their own, multiply together to create an experience that really hinders other staples of this type of game, such as the main campaign, side missions, and even the moment-to-moment gameplay. The game leans very heavily into an RPG style of game, which the Arkham games, while having components of RPG mechanics in them, never leaned all the way into being RPGs themselves. It's interesting that Gotham Knights made this decision, as the RPG-based gameplay has been a point of criticism of gamers in recent years, especially with things like the newer Assassin's Creed titles. I can't help but wonder if some of these ideas were more pressured onto the developers from executives at Warner Brothers, or if they really were the creative vision of Warner Brothers Games Montreal. Either way, I do feel that Gotham Knights succeeds in being a mostly cohesive experience, and I would argue that the systems themselves work well. The developers here did a good job of making the combat what it was supposed to be, and making the traversal and all the puzzles and all the stealth what it was supposed to be. They clearly followed what the creative creative vision for Gotham Knights was. I just think that there were, like many other critics have said, a lot of decisions that were made early on in the development of Gotham Knights that add up and make for a pretty frustrating counterbalance to all of the good things about the game. Beyond that, I would argue that the game is just trying to achieve too much. There is a basis here for a nemesis system, though it doesn't have any named Rogues Gallery members on it. It's just random names that looked like they were cycled through a random name generator. You'll see on a big screen in the main menu when you go to Gotham's Most Wanted, oh, Timmy Jones is wanted. If you go to a high crime or a very high crime, you might see him and be able to knock him out, but he's just a regular enemy with that name over his head. You're never going to find Bane or Killer Croc in the open world, which would have been such a cool feature to add to an RPG, to have those random boss encounters that kind of came out of nowhere. But Gotham Knights has very little to surprise you with. Even the Rogues Gallery members that they do choose, while they start out seeming like they're going to be plentiful, quickly fall off. The game is primarily focused on the Court of Owls, and another faction that I don't want to spoil since this is a spoiler-free review, but even the Court of Owls in the narrative are pretty underwhelming in my opinion. I had a hard time believing that this universe's Batman could not have uncovered them earlier, and once I did learn the secrets of the court, all of the mystique and mysterious nature of them unraveled very quickly. This was not a very difficult group to learn the secrets about, and the twist and the reveal behind who was leading them, it was just all really underwhelming and didn't carry the impact that I think was intended. The highest point of this game's story feels like it was ripped off from the Batman, which released earlier this year, and I don't think it was. I just think that it happened to be two scenes that had a similar payoff that were written by different writers. But it was underwhelming having seen a scene that I felt was done better in the Batman, kind of recreated shot for shot here, again, even though I think that was an unintentional choice. Outside of the largely predictable and unfortunately forgettable story, there are 3 side missions that are really cool in their own right, but they are too short and too few. You can take on Harley Quinn, Clayface, and Mr. Freeze, but this game could have stood to have 3 to 6 more of these encounters to really make the open world feel more dense and lived in. In terms of the random crimes and the premeditated encounters, they do get really repetitive, and I started realizing that they don't really do anything that wasn't already in Arkham Knight. Yes, there are bank robberies in Gotham Knights. There were also bank robberies in Arkham Knight, except they ended with an encounter with Two-Face. Nothing of the sort happens here, and that's why I'm saying that Gotham Knights feels shallow. It's a system that initially seems really intriguing, but never leads anywhere. There's never any follow-through. It never goes deeper than just, oh, there's another armored truck robbery, or oh, there's another bank robbery happening. In terms of upgrades and customization here too, while cosmetically you can really alter your character, and while you can create new abilities to upgrade for your character, it never really feels like it changes the game very much. In something like the Batman Arkham series, the way that it would work is you would get a new gadget at some point in the story, and it was really fun to use against enemies until you found an enemy that knew how to counteract that gadget, and it would always keep you on your toes. In this game, you can use ability points and you can get some gadgets and some cool momentum abilities, but you never run into enemies that know how to counteract that because the game is trying to service any of the 4 playable characters you can be experiencing the game as at any time. Unfortunately, this is a system that doesn't really work in favor of this game because while you can create a pretty varied version of your character from someone else's build of the same character, the game never responds to that. It's always the same level of challenge. And even the story and the cutscenes feel somewhat generically executed in order to accommodate for any of the characters that you can be playing as. I would also even argue that the chemistry between the characters themselves feels very limited, because even if you're playing the whole game as Batgirl like I did, then characters like Nightwing, Red Hood, and Robin will not be able to join you in combat unless you have a friend joining you in multiplayer. Instead, you will only see them when you go back to the Belfry and have a pre-scripted cutscene, and it just feels somewhat clunky and out of place. And then the other characters that you're not playing as, despite being the other headlining characters of the story, don't really get a role in the game because you're playing as one of the 4 playable characters, And so then as a result, the game can never have a really cool plot point like Robin getting kidnapped or Nightwing getting kidnapped or having Red Hood get angry and become a villain for part of the game. And as a result, I feel that Gotham Knights has some really interesting agency that it tries to hand to the player, but it's at the expense of a deeply refined experience created for a single character. And as a result, as I mentioned before, it makes the whole game feel somewhat shallow and somewhat generic. I do think that this is a game that has promise, and if they add more villains in DLC, I think that would even improve my experience here. But unfortunately, Gotham Knights just does not retain the attention to detail that previous superhero AAA outings have had. I would even argue that there are certain things in Gotham Knights that feel more akin to a high-budget indie game than a high-budget AAA Warner Brothers release. I really want to emphasize that it gives me no pleasure to say that I didn't like Gotham Knights as much as I wanted to. I did enjoy it, and I'm going to give the game a 6.8 out of 10. I think it's good, and I think there's a lot of room for improvement. And I really want to give props to Warner Brothers Games Montreal for sticking with the pitch of doing something different. I just think it's unfortunate that they weren't quite able to pull through their campaign promise of showing us Gotham's response to a dead Batman. Catwoman, Two-Face, Joker, none of those guys are in this game, and even the villains that are here don't really seem to be operating much differently. It kind of feels like business as usual, except Batman just isn't present. The gameplay tries desperately to borrow from Arkham, Spider-Man, Assassin's Creed, and implement some of its own ideas, but none of these ideas are integrated as well as they were in those aforementioned games. With that being said, Gotham Knights hits many of the beats that the Arkham games did not, and I think that it shows potential for Warner Brothers Games Montreal moving forward. I do think that it sets them on a distinctly original and different path, and I am anxious to see what their next game will be. I hope that they can take the things that worked in Gotham Knights and work around some of those things that didn't resonate with players. I'm definitely feeling for the developers who are seeing this game not get the reception they wanted. I think it's disappointing. I definitely don't think this game deserved 4s and 5s out of 10s. I think it's a very serviceable and good game with many enjoyable elements and a lot of ambition, and that's what this game really has. It has a lot of heart, and it has a lot of passion behind it, and I don't know if it paid off in this game. I certainly didn't enjoy it as much as I wanted to, but I think moving forward, there is a lot of potential for this studio, and I think that the talent does shine through even the disappointing aspects of this game. But those are my thoughts. Please be sure to leave your score in the thoughts below. Again, I'm giving this one a 6.8 out of 10. I liked it, but I didn't love it, but I think that it could be improved with DLC, and I think with future releases, with this gameplay model, if some of my criticisms are addressed, I really do think I could love this style of game. But thanks you all so much for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and we will see you guys in the next one.